The sudden pounding of hooves across the hardened earth was the only warning the small town of Crested Pine, Colorado, received before Owen Quaid came barreling down Main Street, his face as pale as the full moon hanging above the jagged mountain peaks. It was nearly midnight in the summer of 1879, and most of the town was asleep, all except for Doc Finnegan, who was just closing up his office when Owen practically fell from his horse, desperation etched into every line of his weather-beaten face. "Mary's time has come, Doc," Owen gasped, his voice breaking with fear. "Something ain't right. She's bleeding something fierce." Without another word, Doc Finnegan grabbed his medical bag and mounted his own horse. The two men raced through the darkness back to the Quaid Ranch, 6 miles outside of town. The modest homestead sat nestled against the backdrop of ponderosa pines, usually a picture of tranquility, but tonight the peaceful scene was shattered by Mary's screams echoing from within the cabin. They were too late. By dawn, Owen Quaid was a widower with 2 screaming newborn babies, a boy and a girl with tufts of copper hair just like their mother's and a hole in his heart that seemed impossible to fill. "Twins," Doc Finnegan said, his voice heavy with sorrow as he placed a gentle hand on Owen's shoulder. "Healthy as can be, both of them. But Mary," he shook his head. "I'm sorry, son. She lost too much blood." Owen stared at his wife's pale face, still beautiful even in death, and then at the 2 tiny strangers who now depended on him for everything. He had no idea how to care for 1 baby, let alone 2. He was a rancher, a man who worked from sunup to sundown with cattle and horses. What did he know about feeding schedules and diapers? "What am I supposed to do, Doc?" Owen asked, his voice hollow. "You need help, son. Someone to care for these little ones while you tend to the ranch." But help wasn't easy to come by in Crested Pine. The town was small, and everyone had their own responsibilities. Owen's nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, and the only family he had left was a brother in San Francisco who he hadn't spoken to in years. For 2 weeks, Owen stumbled through each day in a fog of grief and exhaustion. He named the twins Matthew and Margaret after his parents, but called them Matt and Maggie. He tried his best, feeding them cow's milk when they cried, changing their cloths when they soiled themselves. But it wasn't enough. The babies grew colicky and fussed constantly. His ranch work suffered. The cattle needed tending, the crops needed harvesting, and Owen couldn't do it all. He was at his breaking point one sweltering August afternoon when he heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Setting down the screaming Maggie in her makeshift cradle next to her equally unhappy brother, Owen stepped outside, squinting against the harsh sunlight. A small wagon drawn by a tired-looking mule rolled to a stop in front of his cabin. The driver, a young woman wearing a faded blue dress and a practical bonnet, climbed down carefully. She looked travel-worn, with dust coating her clothes and fatigue evident in the way she carried herself, but her eyes were clear and determined as she approached Owen. "Mr. Quaid?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight Eastern accent. "I'm Emma Anderson. Your brother Lawrence sent me." Owen stared at her in confusion. "Lawrence? I haven't heard from him in 5 years." "He received your telegram about Mary's passing," she explained. "I worked for him and his wife in San Francisco as a housekeeper. When he learned of your situation, he asked if I would come and help with the children." As if on cue, both babies began wailing even louder from inside the cabin. Emma's gaze shifted toward the sound, and without waiting for an invitation, she strode past Owen and into his home. Owen followed, watching in amazement as she immediately went to the twins. With practiced movements, she checked their swaddling clothes, tested the temperature of the milk sitting nearby, and then picked up Maggie, who was the loudest of the 2. "This milk is too cold," Emma said matter-of-factly, "and these little ones need to be bathed. How long has it been since they've had a proper washing?" Owen ran a hand through his unkempt hair, embarrassment washing over him. "I've tried my best, madam." Emma's expression softened. "Of course you have. But babies need specialized care, Mr. Quaid, especially without their mother." She glanced around the cabin, which had fallen into disarray over the past 2 weeks. "If you'll allow me, I can help set things right." "Did Lawrence hire you to come here?" Owen asked, suspicious of this woman who had appeared out of nowhere, yet seemed to know exactly what his children needed. Emma shook her head. "Not exactly. He offered to pay my way here, but I'm not on his payroll anymore. Her cheeks flushed slightly. "I recently found myself in need of a new situation. I have experience with children, and when I heard about your loss and these little ones," she looked down at Maggie, who had begun to quiet in her arms, "I thought perhaps I could be of service." "I can't pay much," Owen admitted. "I don't need much," Emma replied. "Just room, board, and enough to save a little." She hesitated. "I understand if you'd prefer to find someone else, someone local perhaps. But I'm here now, with willing hands ready to work." Before Owen could respond, Matt began crying again, and Emma efficiently shifted Maggie to one arm so she could pick up the boy with her other. To Owen's astonishment, both babies began to settle almost immediately. "How did you do that?" he asked, amazed. Emma smiled, the expression transforming her tired face and revealing a natural beauty that Owen hadn't noticed at first. "Babies can sense when someone is comfortable holding them. They respond to confidence." She glanced around the cabin again. "If you'll show me where everything is, Mr. Quaid, I can get started right away." Owen hesitated only a moment longer. The woman had clearly traveled a long way, and she seemed to know what she was doing with the twins. He was desperate, and she was offering exactly what he needed. "The room off the kitchen was meant to be the nursery," he said finally. "You can stay there for now. I've been sleeping on a cot in the main room to be near the twins." "That's very sensible of you," Emma said approvingly. "Now, do you have any clean linens? And I'll need to heat some water for their baths." Just like that, Emma Anderson entered their lives. By nightfall, the twins were bathed, fed, and sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. The kitchen was spotless, and a simple but delicious stew was bubbling in the pot over the fire. Owen sat at his own table, a plate of hot food in front of him, feeling as though he'd been caught in a whirlwind. "Thank you," he said as Emma poured him a cup of coffee. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up today." "It was Providence, I'm sure," Emma said, sitting down across from him with her own plate. "Those babies needed someone, and I needed somewhere to go. It worked out for all of us." Owen studied her curiously. She was younger than he'd first thought, probably in her mid-20s. Her brown hair was neatly pinned back, and now that she'd washed away the travel dust, he could see that her skin was fair with a sprinkling of freckles across her nose. She was pretty in an unassuming way, with intelligent green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "You said you needed somewhere to go," Owen remarked cautiously. "Are you running from something, Miss Anderson?" Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Not in the way you're thinking, Mr. Quaid. I'm not a criminal, if that's your concern." She set her spoon down. "My position with your brother and his wife ended when they decided to move to Europe. Mrs. Quaid offered to take me with them, but She hesitated. "I've never wanted to leave America. And truthfully, I was ready for a change. I've been in service since I was 16, always in someone else's home. When your brother mentioned your situation, it seemed like a chance to do something meaningful." Owen nodded, accepting her explanation for now. "Well, I'm grateful you're here. But I should warn you, this isn't an easy life. Ranching is hard work, and we're isolated out here. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away, and town is 6 miles. Winters can be brutal." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Quaid," Emma said with quiet dignity, "and I've endured my share of difficult winters." "Call me Owen," he said impulsively. "If you're going to be living in my home and caring for my children, we should dispense with formalities." A small smile touched her lips. "Then I'm Emma to you as well." That night, for the first time since Mary's death, Owen slept soundly, knowing that his children were in capable hands. He woke at dawn, as usual. But instead of being greeted by crying babies, he smelled coffee brewing and bacon frying. Emma was already up, the twins fed and content in their cradles while she prepared breakfast. She'd found one of Mary's old aprons and tied it around her waist, and the sight brought an unexpected lump to Owen's throat. It was such a domestic scene, so normal, yet everything had changed. "Good morning," Emma said brightly. "I hope I didn't wake you. The little ones were hungry early." "No, this is my usual time," Owen replied, moving to wash his hands in the basin she'd prepared. "I have the cattle to tend to." "I've packed you some food for midday," Emma said, gesturing to a cloth-wrapped package on the counter. "There's bread, cheese, and some of last night's stew." Owen stared at the package, then at Emma. "You didn't have to do that." "It's no trouble," she said simply. "You need to keep up your strength for your work, and the babies and I will be fine here. I found some material that might make better diapers for them, if you don't mind me using it." "Use whatever you need," Owen said, sitting down to the plate of food she set before him. As the days passed, Emma transformed the Quaid household. The twins thrived under her care, growing plumper and more alert. She established routines, kept the cabin immaculate, and made sure Owen ate properly. She even found time to plant a small vegetable garden beside the house, promising fresh produce before summer's end. For his part, Owen found himself able to focus on the ranch again. The summer hay was cut and stored, the cattle fattened on the rich mountain grass, and he even had time to repair the fences that had been neglected in the chaos following Mary's death. But it wasn't just practical matters that improved. Gradually, the oppressive cloud of grief that had hung over the cabin began to lift. Owen found himself smiling at Maggie's attempts to roll over, or at Matt's serious expressions as he studied his own tiny fists. In the evenings, he would sit in his chair by the fire and listen as Emma sang soft lullabies to the twins, her voice sweet and clear in the quiet cabin. One evening in late September, as the first chill of autumn crept into the air, Owen returned from checking on a heifer that was about to calve to find Emma sitting on the porch, the twins asleep inside. She had a piece of mending in her hands, but she wasn't working on it. Instead, she was gazing at the sunset, painting the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "It's beautiful here," she said as Owen sat down on the step beside her. "So different from San Francisco." "Do you miss the city?" Owen asked. Emma considered the question. "I miss certain things, the libraries, the shops, but I don't miss the noise or the crowds." She smiled at him. "And I've grown quite fond of your little ones." "They've grown fond of you too," Owen said. "I don't know what we would have done without you these past weeks." Emma's cheeks colored at the compliment. "I'm glad I could help. They're wonderful babies." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the sun sank behind the mountains and the first stars began to appear in the deepening blue of the sky. "May I ask you something?" "Emma," Owen said finally. "Of course. What really brought you here?" "It's a long way to come just because my brother mentioned I needed help." Emma's hands stilled in her lap. "I told you the truth about your brother and his wife moving to Europe," she said carefully. "But there was another reason I couldn't stay in San Francisco." She took a deep breath. "Your brother's business partner, Mr. Hollister, had developed an inappropriate interest in me. When I rejected his advances, he became unpleasant. Your brother didn't know I never told him, but when the opportunity arose to leave, I took it." Owen's jaw tightened. "Did this man hurt you?" "No," Emma assured him quickly. "Nothing like that. But he made my position uncomfortable. And with your brother leaving," she shrugged, "I needed a new start somewhere. When Lawrence mentioned your situation, it seemed like providence. I could help someone who needed it and escape a difficult situation at the same time." Owen nodded slowly. "Well, I'm sorry for what you went through, but I can't say I'm sorry you came here. The twins need you." He hesitated before adding quietly, "And so do I." Emma looked at him in surprise, and their eyes held for a moment longer than was proper. Owen felt something stir within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced since Mary had been alive. It startled him, and he looked away quickly. "I should check on the twins," Emma said, rising to her feet. "Of course," Owen agreed, standing as well. As Emma moved toward the door, he impulsively reached out and touched her arm. "Thank you for telling me the truth. Emma gave him a small smile. Thank you for listening. As autumn deepened, the days grew shorter and the nights colder. Owen worked hard to prepare the ranch for winter, knowing that once the snows came, they could be isolated for days or even weeks at a time. Emma was equally busy, canning the last of the garden vegetables, drying herbs, and preparing the cabin for the cold months ahead. The twins continued to thrive, growing stronger each day. By late October, they were 4 months old and developing distinct personalities. Matt was serious and watchful, taking everything in with his solemn blue eyes. Maggie was more adventurous, always trying to reach for things beyond her grasp and filling the cabin with her happy babbling. Emma loved them both fiercely, though she was careful never to overstep her bounds. They were Owen's children, not hers, a fact she reminded herself of daily. But it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain that emotional distance, not just from the twins, but from their father as well. Owen Quaid was unlike any man she had known before. Hard-working and honorable, he never complained about the difficult hand life had dealt him. He grieved for his wife quietly, but he didn't allow his sorrow to prevent him from being a good father. Emma admired his strength, his gentle way with the twins, and the respect with which he treated her. And if sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart beat faster, well, that was something she tried not to dwell on. The first snow fell in early November, a light dusting that melted by noon. But it was a warning of what was to come, and Owen redoubled his efforts to prepare. He split extra firewood, checked and rechecked the barn roof, and made sure the livestock had adequate shelter. Emma, too, felt the urgency. She convinced Owen to take her to town so she could stock up on supplies they might need during the winter: extra flour and sugar, fabric for new clothes for the rapidly growing twins, medicine in case anyone fell ill. The trip to Crested Pine was Emma's first since her arrival, and she was curious about the town that was now her home. It was smaller than she had imagined, just one main street with the essential businesses: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, the doctor's office, and a church. As they tied up the wagon in front of Harrington's general store, Emma noticed people watching them with undisguised interest. Owen helped her down from the wagon seat, his hands strong and steady at her waist, and she was acutely aware of how this might look to the townspeople, a widower and his housekeeper, arriving together with his children. "Pay them no mind," Owen murmured, noticing her discomfort. "Small towns run on gossip. They don't mean any harm by it." Inside the store, Emma tried to focus on her shopping list, while Owen greeted the proprietor, Mr. Harrington, a portly man with friendly eyes and impressive whiskers. "Owen Quaid, as I live and breathe," Harrington exclaimed. "We were starting to think you'd forgotten where town was." His gaze shifted to Emma, curiosity evident. "And who might this young lady be?" "This is Miss Emma Anderson," Owen said formally. "She's been caring for the twins since August. Emma, this is Harold Harrington, owner of the finest establishment in Crested Pine." "The only establishment of its kind in Crested Pine, you mean?" Harrington chuckled. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Anderson. We've been wondering how Owen was managing with those little ones." "Good to know they're in capable hands." Emma smiled politely. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Harrington." As she moved through the store selecting items, Emma became aware of a woman watching her from near the fabric display. She was elegantly dressed in a burgundy walking suit, her blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style beneath a fashionable hat. "You must be the woman Lawrence Quaid sent," the woman said, approaching Emma with an assessing gaze. "I'm Vivian Parker. My father is the mayor." "Emma Anderson," Emma replied, extending her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Miss Parker." Vivian's handshake was brief and cool. "I've known the Quaid family for years," she said, a note of possessiveness in her voice. "Mary was a dear friend of mine. Her passing was a terrible tragedy." "Yes, it was," Emma agreed sincerely. "The twins are beautiful children. She would be proud of them." "Indeed." Vivian's gaze drifted to where Owen stood chatting with Harrington, the twins in their basket nearby. "Owen seems to be coping better than expected." I've called at the ranch several times to check on him, but he's always been too busy to receive visitors. The implication was clear, and Emma felt a flare of defensiveness. Mr. Quaid works very hard, she said evenly. Between the ranch and the babies, there's precious little time for social calls. Vivian's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched slightly. Of course. Well, do let him know that I'd be happy to help with the children any time. I was quite close to Mary, after all. Before Emma could respond, Owen appeared at her side. Ready, Emma? We should start back before the weather turns. Vivian immediately brightened. Owen, it's wonderful to see you in town. You're looking well. Owen nodded politely. Miss Parker, how's your father? Very well, thank you. He's been asking after you. Perhaps you could join us for dinner soon? Sunday, perhaps? Owen shifted uncomfortably. That's kind of you, but the twins are still too young for me to be away in the evenings. You could bring them, of course, Vivian suggested eagerly. And your housekeeper as well, if necessary. Emma busied herself with the basket of goods she'd selected, pretending not to notice the awkward exchange. Perhaps another time, Owen said firmly. We need to be getting back now. Good day, Miss Parker. Once they were in the wagon and heading out of town, Emma couldn't help but ask, Is Miss Parker a particular friend of yours? Owen's expression was unreadable. Vivian's father owns the bank and half the businesses in town. The Parkers have always considered themselves Crested Pine's first family. He glanced at Emma. Vivian had hopes that I might court her before I met Mary. She wasn't pleased when I chose a farmer's daughter over the mayor's. I see, Emma said, surprised by his candor. She seems very determined. Owen's laugh was without humor. That's one way of putting it. Vivian Parker usually gets what she wants. The rest of the journey passed in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived back at the ranch, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, promising more snow before nightfall. True to the weather's promise, the snow began just as dusk was falling, thick flakes swirling down from the leaden sky. By morning, several inches covered the ground, transforming the landscape into a pristine white wonderland. The twins were fascinated by the snow, staring wide-eyed from the window as Emma held them up to see. Look at that, little ones, she cooed, your first snowfall. Owen came in from tending the livestock, stamping snow from his boots and bringing a blast of cold air with him. It's really coming down, he reported, hanging his coat by the door. Might be snowed in for a few days if it keeps up. Emma turned from the window, the twins still in her arms. We're well provisioned, thanks to yesterday's trip, though I do worry about you going out in such weather to tend the animals. It's all part of ranching, Owen said with a shrug, but he looked pleased at her concern. He came closer, reaching out to touch Matt's cheek gently. What do you think of the snow, son? You'll be building forts in it before you know it. Emma smiled at the image of the twins a few years from now, playing in the snow with their father. But then her smile faltered as she realized she might not be here to see it. Her position in the Quaid household was temporary after all. Once the twins were older, or if Owen remarried, her services would no longer be required. The thought brought an unexpected pain to her heart. Emma. Owen was looking at her with concern. Are you all right? You went pale all of a sudden. She forced a smile. I'm fine. Just a chill. She handed Matt to him. Here, hold your son while I fix us some hot tea. The days of being snowed in passed peacefully. Emma kept the twins on their regular schedule, and Owen divided his time between necessary outdoor chores and helping inside the cabin. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Emma sewing or knitting, while Owen read aloud from one of the few books they possessed, usually the Bible, but sometimes one of the novels Mary had treasured. On the third night, as a particularly fierce blizzard howled outside, Owen closed the Bible he'd been reading from and looked thoughtfully at Emma. May I ask you something personal? He said. Emma set aside her knitting. Of course. You're young, educated, and clearly capable. Why have you never married? Surely there were suitors in San Francisco. The question caught Emma off guard. She was silent for a moment, considering her answer. There were a few men who expressed interest, she admitted finally, but none that I wish to encourage. Most men want a wife who will be content to keep house and raise children with no thoughts or ambitions of her own. And that's not what you want? Owen asked, genuinely curious. Emma smiled wryly. Look at what I'm doing now, Owen. Keeping house and raising children. It's not that I object to those duties, but I want to be valued for my mind as well as my domestic skills. I want a partnership, not servitude. Owen nodded slowly. Mary felt the same way. She helped with the ranch accounts, had ideas for improving our methods. She was the smartest person I knew. She sounds remarkable, Emma said softly. She was. Owen's voice was tender with remembrance. We were friends first, you know. That was the foundation of everything that came after the respect, the trust. He looked directly at Emma. I think that's rare, to find someone you can talk to as easily as you work beside them. Their eyes met across the warm, fire-lit room, and Emma felt something shift between them, a recognition of the bond that had formed over the past months. It wasn't just the twins that connected them anymore. It was conversations like this, shared values, mutual respect. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Before either of them could speak again, Maggie began to fuss in her cradle, breaking the moment. Emma rose quickly to tend to her, grateful for the distraction. Later that night, as she lay in her small room listening to the wind howl outside, Emma confronted the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Owen Quaid, and that complicated everything. The blizzard finally broke after 5 days, leaving behind snowdrifts taller than a man in some places. Owen spent hours digging paths to the barn and clearing space for the animals to move. Emma watched from the window, worry creasing her brow as he worked tirelessly in the bitter cold. When he finally came inside, his beard and eyebrows crusted with ice, she had hot coffee and stew waiting. "You'll catch your death out there," she scolded gently, taking his frozen hands between her warm ones and rubbing them. Owen looked startled at the gesture, but he didn't pull away. "The stock needed tending," he said simply, "and now we need supplies from town. We're running low on some essentials." Emma frowned. "Surely you're not thinking of trying to reach Crested Pine in these conditions." "I don't have much choice. We need flour, sugar, and I want Doc Finnegan to check on the twins. They haven't had a proper medical examination since they were born." "They're thriving," Emma protested. "Surely it can wait until the roads are clearer." Owen's expression softened. "I know you take excellent care of them, Emma, but they should see the doctor regularly, and I need to check my mail, see if Lawrence has written. He should know how well his recommendation turned out." Emma blushed at the implied compliment. "At least wait another day or two," she urged. "Let the sun melt some of this snow." In the end, Owen agreed to wait, but 2 days later he hitched up the wagon and prepared to make the journey to town. Emma helped him bundle up against the cold, wrapping his scarf securely around his neck and making sure his gloves had no holes. "Don't fuss, woman," Owen grumbled, but his eyes were warm with affection. "I'll be back before dark." "You'd better be," Emma said sternly, "or I'll come looking for you myself." Owen laughed, the sound rich and full in a way she rarely heard. Now that's a threat to take seriously. Impulsively, he leaned down and pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. "Take care of our babies." Our babies. The words hung in the air between them as Owen climbed into the wagon and took up the reins. Emma stood on the porch, the twins bundled in her arms, watching until the wagon disappeared around the bend in the snow-covered road. The day stretched long as Emma waited for Owen's return. She kept the twins entertained, baked bread, and periodically checked the window for any sign of the wagon. As afternoon turned to evening and the shadows lengthened across the snow, her anxiety grew. "Your papa should be home by now," she told the twins as she fed them their evening meal. He promised he'd be back before dark. But darkness fell, and still Owen did not return. Emma lit lamps and placed them in the windows, hoping to guide him home. She paced the cabin, alternating between worry and attempts to rationalize his delay. Perhaps he had encountered friends in town, or the roads were worse than expected. Maybe he had decided to stay overnight rather than risk the journey in the dark. Yet a gnawing fear persisted. Owen was too responsible to worry her intentionally. Something must have happened. By midnight, Emma had made her decision. She couldn't leave the twins alone, but she couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer. At first light, she would bundle the babies up and take them to the nearest neighbor, the McPhersons, 3 miles away. From there, she would go to town to look for Owen. She slept fitfully, waking at every sound, hoping to hear the wagon or Owen's footsteps on the porch. But dawn arrived with no sign of him. Moving quickly, Emma prepared the twins for the journey. She bundled them in every blanket she could spare and secured them in a large basket that could be carried. She left a note on the table in case Owen returned while she was gone, explaining her plan. The walk to the McPherson farm was difficult. The snow was deep and carrying the twins slowed her considerably. What should have been an hour's journey took nearly 3 as she struggled through the drifts. Eliza McPherson, a kindly woman in her 50s, was shocked to find Emma at her door with the twins. "Owen went to town yesterday and hasn't returned," Emma explained breathlessly. "I fear something has happened to him." Come in," Eliza urged, taking the basket with the twins. "James," she called to her husband, "hitch up the sleigh. Owen Quaid is missing." While James McPherson prepared the sleigh, Eliza tried to convince Emma to stay with the twins. "The road to town could be dangerous, dear. Let James go." But Emma was adamant. "I have to find him, Mrs. McPherson. The twins will be fine with you for a few hours." Reluctantly, Eliza agreed, and soon Emma was seated beside James in the sleigh, speeding toward Crested Pine as fast as the snowy roads would allow. The town was quiet when they arrived, most people staying indoors in the cold weather. James headed straight for the sheriff's office while Emma went to check at the hotel, thinking Owen might have taken a room there. The clerk shook his head when she inquired. "Haven't seen Owen Quaid in months, madam." Next, she tried the general store, where Mr. Harrington was just opening up. "Owen," he repeated when Emma asked. "Yes, he was here yesterday around noon, bought his supplies and said he was heading right back to the ranch on account of you being there alone with the little ones." Emma's heart sank. "He never arrived home." Harrington's jovial expression turned serious. "That's not like Owen. He's one of the most responsible men I know." By now, James McPherson had returned with Sheriff Taylor, a tall, stern-looking man with a bushy mustache. "Miss Anderson," the sheriff greeted her. "Mr. McPherson has explained the situation. When exactly did Mr. Quaid leave for town?" Emma gave him all the details she could, trying to keep her voice steady despite her growing fear. Sheriff Taylor listened carefully, making notes. "There are a couple of places between town and the Quaid Ranch where the road gets treacherous in this weather," he said when she'd finished. "I'll organize a search party right away." "I'm coming with you," Emma said firmly. The sheriff looked like he wanted to object, but something in Emma's expression must have convinced him of her determination. "Very well," he said with a sigh. "But you'll do exactly as I say, understood?" Within the hour, a search party of 6 men on horseback, accompanied by Emma and the sheriff in a sturdy sleigh, set out from Crested Pine. They followed the main road toward the Quaid Ranch, moving slowly and checking any place where a wagon might have run into trouble. It was James McPherson who spotted at first the overturned wagon half buried in snow at the bottom of a steep ravine. "There!" he shouted, pointing. Emma's heart seemed to stop. The wagon was Owen's, she could tell even from a distance, but there was no sign of him or the horses. Sheriff Taylor immediately took charge, directing 2 men to descend into the ravine to check the wagon while the others spread out to search the surrounding area. "He might have tried to walk for help," the sheriff explained to Emma, whose face had gone deathly pale. "If he was injured but conscious, he would have known staying with the wagon in this cold could be fatal." Emma nodded numbly, her eyes scanning the pristine white landscape for any sign of the man who had come to mean so much to her. It was an agonizing half-hour before one of the searchers gave a shout from the tree line about 50 yards from the ravine. Everyone converged on the spot, and Emma's breath caught in her throat when she saw the still form lying in the shelter of a large pine. Owen lay unconscious, his face pale with cold, a nasty gash on his forehead crusted with frozen blood. But he was breathing. "He's alive," Sheriff Taylor confirmed, kneeling beside him. "Looks like he hit his head in the accident, managed to get this far and then collapsed. We need to get him to Doc Finnegan right away." They wrapped Owen in blankets and carefully loaded him into the sheriff's sleigh. Emma insisted on riding with him, cradling his head in her lap, whispering encouragements even though he couldn't hear her. "Hold on, Owen," she murmured, tears freezing on her cheeks. "The twins need you. I need you." Back in Crested Pine, Doc Finnegan took charge, examining Owen thoroughly while Emma waited anxiously in his small reception room. After what seemed like an eternity, the doctor emerged, his expression serious but not grave. "He has a concussion, 2 cracked ribs, and mild frostbite on his hands and feet," he reported. "But he's young and strong. With proper care, he should make a full recovery." Emma sagged with relief. "Can I see him?" "He's conscious but groggy," Doc Finnegan warned. "Don't expect too much." When Emma entered the examination room, Owen's eyes were closed. He looked vulnerable lying there, his strong frame diminished somehow by the white bandage around his head and the blankets tucked tightly around him. She approached quietly, not wanting to disturb him if he was resting. But as she reached the bedside, his eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found her face. "Emma," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm here," she said, taking his hand gently to avoid the bandages covering his frostbitten fingers. "The twins?" "Safe with Mrs. McPherson," she assured him. "I was so worried when you didn't come home." Owen tried to smile, but it turned into a grimace of pain. "Wagon hit a patch of ice on that steep bend past Miller's Creek, went right over the edge, tried to walk back to town, but I don't remember much after that." His eyes searched hers. "How did you find me?" "I couldn't just wait at the ranch," Emma explained. "I took the twins to the McPhersons and came looking for you with Mr. McPherson and Sheriff Taylor." Owen's eyes widened. "You walked 3 miles through the snow with the twins?" "I had to find you," Emma said simply. Owen's fingers tightened around hers, despite what must have been considerable pain. "You're remarkable, Emma Anderson," he whispered. Before she could respond, Doc Finnegan returned. "Owen needs rest now," he said firmly. "And you, Miss Anderson. Look dead on your feet yourself. The hotel has a room ready for you. The twins are fine with the McPhersons for tonight." Emma wanted to protest, to stay by Owen's side, but she knew the doctor was right. Owen needed to rest to recover. And truth be told, the emotional and physical strain of the day was catching up with her. "I'll be back first thing in the morning," she promised Owen. He nodded weakly. "Thank you," he murmured, "for finding me." Emma slept poorly that night, despite her exhaustion. Her dreams were troubled, filled with images of Owen lying in the snow, calling for help that didn't come. She woke before dawn and dressed quickly, eager to check on him. Doc Finnegan was already at his office when she arrived. "He had a restless night," he reported. "The pain is considerable, but he's stable." Owen was awake when she entered, looking pale but more alert than the previous evening. "Emma," he greeted her, his voice stronger. "How are you feeling?" she asked, taking the chair beside his bed. "Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle," he admitted with a weak smile. "But Doc says nothing's permanently damaged, except maybe my pride." Emma returned his smile, relief washing through her. "I was so afraid," she admitted softly. Owen's expression grew serious. "When I was lying out there in the cold, I had a lot of time to think. About the twins, about the ranch." He paused, his eyes holding hers. "About you." Emma's heart quickened. "Owen." "Let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I realize something important. Life is short and unpredictable. Mary taught me that. And I've been given a second chance that I don't deserve to waste." He took a deep breath. Emma, I know it hasn't been that long since Mary passed, and maybe this is too soon, but I care for you. Deeply. You've become essential to me, and not just because of how well you care for the twins. Emma felt tears welling in her eyes. I care for you too, she whispered. Owen looked relieved, then apprehensive. I'm not asking for anything right now. I know it wouldn't be proper so soon after, and you might not feel the same way. But I wanted you to know how I feel. Emma reached out and took his hand, careful of his injured fingers. I understand the need to honor Mary's memory, she said softly, and I respect that. But I want you to know that my feelings for you go far beyond my duty to the twins or my position in your household. They gazed at each other in silent understanding, both aware that they were crossing a threshold, but not yet ready to define what lay on the other side. The moment was interrupted by Doc Finnegan's return. I've sent word to the McPhersons, he informed them. They'll bring the twins to town later today. And Owen, I want you to stay here for at least 2 more days before attempting the journey home. Owen started to protest, but Emma cut him off. The doctor is right. You need to regain your strength. I can take a room at the hotel for a few days with the twins. That's not necessary, came a new voice from the doorway. Vivian Parker stood there, impeccably dressed as always, a basket of food in her hands. When I heard about Owen's accident, I immediately spoke with my father. We insist that you and the children stay at our home until Owen is well enough to travel. Emma glanced at Owen, whose expression was unreadable. That's very kind of you, Miss Parker, she said carefully, but I wouldn't want to impose. Nonsense, Vivian said dismissively. It's the least we can do for an old family friend. She moved to Owen's bedside, effectively displacing Emma. Owen, you poor man. When I heard what happened, I was beside myself with worry. Owen shifted uncomfortably. It was just an accident, Vivian. Nothing serious. Nothing serious? Vivian exclaimed. You could have frozen to death out there. Thank goodness Miss Anderson thought to raise the alarm. She said Emma's name with a politeness that didn't reach her eyes. Now, Father has already arranged everything. Miss Anderson and the twins will stay with us, and you'll come to our home to convalesce once Doc Finnegan releases you. I won't take no for an answer. Owen looked at Emma, a silent question in his eyes. She understood his dilemma. The Parkers were influential in Crested Pine, and refusing their hospitality could be seen as an insult. But accepting meant placing himself in the twins and, by extension, Emma under Vivian's roof and influence. Perhaps a compromise, Emma suggested carefully. The twins and I could stay at the hotel where we wouldn't disrupt your household, Miss Parker. And Owen could make his decision about convalescence when he's feeling stronger. Vivian's smile thinned. I assure you it would be no disruption, and the hotel is hardly suitable for infants in this weather. The Parker home is large, warm, and has plenty of staff to help with the children. The standoff was broken by Doc Finnegan, who had been observing the exchange with shrewd eyes. Miss Anderson has been caring for the Quaid twins since August, he said mildly. They're used to her ways. Separating them from their primary caregiver could be upsetting for them. Vivian's cheeks flushed slightly. Of course, Miss Anderson would stay with the children. I simply meant that she would have help if she needed it. I think, Owen said firmly, that Emma and the twins will be more comfortable at the hotel for now. We appreciate your offer, Vivian, but we've already imposed enough on the good people of Crested Pine. Though Vivian was clearly displeased, she accepted the decision with as much grace as she could muster, leaving her basket of food and promising to call again the next day. After she had gone, Owen sighed heavily. I'm sorry about that, he said to Emma. You have nothing to apologize for, she assured him. Miss Parker is clearly concerned about your welfare. Owen raised an eyebrow. Vivian Parker is concerned about Vivian Parker, he said bluntly. She's been trying to secure a proposal from me since we were 18. She's very beautiful, Emma observed neutrally. Beauty isn't everything, Owen replied, his eyes fixed on Emma's face in a way that made her blush. Anyway, I meant what I said. You and the twins will be more comfortable at the hotel, and I'll join you there once Doc releases me. The McPhersons arrived in the early afternoon with the twins, who were fussy after the disruption to their routine, but otherwise none the worse for their adventure. Emma settled them into the hotel room, grateful for the comfortable accommodations, but missing the familiar surroundings of the ranch. For the next 2 days, she divided her time between caring for the twins and visiting Owen at Doc Finnegan's office. Each time she saw him, he seemed a little stronger, a little more like himself. They were careful not to revisit the conversation they'd started about their feelings for each other, aware of the curious eyes and ears in the small town. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement that they were more to each other than employer and employee. On the 3rd day, Doc Finnegan pronounced Owen well enough to leave his care, though he warned against any strenuous activity for at least 2 more weeks. The McPhersons offered to drive them all back to the ranch in their sleigh, and by late afternoon, they were home. The cabin welcomed them back with its familiar comfort, though it had grown cold in their absence. While James McPherson helped Owen inside, Emma hurried to build up the fire and warm the rooms. The twins, sensing they were back in their own environment, settled down contentedly. After the McPhersons left, promising to check on them in a few days, Emma prepared a simple supper while Owen rested in his chair by the fire. The domesticity of the scene struck her forcefully. This could be their life together, if they chose it. A family, a home, a shared purpose. "It's good to be back," Owen said, watching her move about the kitchen. "Yes, it is," Emma agreed, "though I think the twins enjoyed their adventure. Mrs. McPherson said they charmed everyone at her house." "They take after their mother that way," Owen said with a fond smile. "Mary could win over anyone with her smile." Emma nodded, used to these mentions of Mary. She had never felt jealous of Owen's love for his late wife. How could she? Mary had given him the twins, had been his partner and friend. Her memory deserved to be honored. After supper, with the twins asleep in their cradles and the cabin warm and peaceful, Owen gestured for Emma to join him by the fire. "There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you," he said, his expression serious. Emma sat down, her heart beating a little faster. "Yes?" "When I was in town before the accident, I received a letter from Lawrence." Owen reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope. "He wrote to tell me that he and his wife have settled in London and are doing well. But he also mentioned something else." He hesitated. "He said that Hollister, his former business partner, has been making inquiries about your whereabouts." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather. "Why would he do that?" "Lawrence thinks he's still interested in you," Owen said, his jaw tightening. "He wanted to warn us in case Hollister decides to come looking for you himself." "He wouldn't," Emma said, but she didn't sound convinced even to her own ears. "Crested Pine is so far from San Francisco." "Men like Hollister are used to getting what they want," Owen said grimly. "And from what Lawrence wrote, he seemed quite determined." Emma stared into the fire, trying to process this unexpected threat to the peaceful life she had built at the ranch. "What should we do?" Owen reached across and took her hand. "I've been thinking about that. There's a solution that would protect you and make me the happiest man in Colorado." Emma looked at him questioningly. "Marry me," Owen said simply. "Be my wife, a mother to the twins. Not just as a practical arrangement, though. It would certainly solve the issue with Hollister. But because I love you, Emma. I realized it when I was lying out there in the snow, thinking I might never see you or the twins again." Emma's breath caught. "Owen, I know it hasn't been a year since Mary died," he continued quickly, "and I know some people might think it's too soon. But life is too short and too unpredictable to waste time on conventions when your heart is certain." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have for months now. But I didn't want to dishonor Mary's memory or make you uncomfortable." Owen's face softened with tenderness. "Mary would want me to be happy," he said, "to find someone who could love our children and be a partner to me. She would have liked you, Emma." "Are you sure?" Emma asked, needing to be certain. This isn't just about protecting me from Hollister? That's part of it, Owen admitted honestly. I want to keep you safe. But my feelings for you have nothing to do with Hollister. I fell in love with you, watching you care for my children, seeing your strength and kindness, talking with you by this fire night after night. He squeezed her hand gently. Will you marry me, Emma Anderson? Will you make this ranch a home again? Emma's heart felt as though it might burst with happiness. Yes, she said, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Yes, I'll marry you, Owen Quaid. Owen leaned forward and kissed her then, a gentle, sweet first kiss that held the promise of a lifetime together. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Crested Pine, with Doc Finnegan and the McPhersons as witnesses, and the twins, dressed in their best clothes, sleeping peacefully through the ceremony in a basket beside them. Some townspeople whispered about the hasty wedding and the propriety of Owen remarrying so soon after Mary's death, but those who knew them, who had seen the genuine love between them and the devoted care they both showed to the twins, offered only congratulations. Vivian Parker notably did not attend the wedding, having left suddenly for an extended visit to relatives in Denver. As winter deepened into the new year of 1880, the Quaid household found a rhythm of happiness that Owen had never expected to know again. Emma transformed from the children's caretaker to their mother in truth as well as in practice. She sang to them, read to them from the growing collection of books that Owen ordered from Denver, and delighted in each new milestone they achieved. And in the privacy of their bedroom, she and Owen discovered a passion for each other that surprised them both with its intensity. Their first night as husband and wife had been tentative, both of them a little shy despite their deep feelings. But as they grew more comfortable with each other, they found a physical expression of their love that left them breathless and eager for more. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, melting the snow and revealing the earth ready for planting. Emma expanded her garden, determined to provide fresh vegetables throughout the summer and plenty to preserve for the following winter. Owen, fully recovered from his injuries, threw himself into the ranch work with fresh energy. On a mild April evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in glorious colors, Owen put his arm around Emma and pulled her close. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "The twins are thriving, the ranch is prospering. And I have you." She tilted her face up to his for a proper kiss. "I have something to tell you," she said when they finally broke apart. "Something wonderful, I hope." Owen looked at her curiously. "What is it?" Emma took his hand and placed it over her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly. "In November, Doc Finnegan thinks." Owen's face transformed with wonder. "A baby," he repeated. "Our baby." Emma nodded, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. "Our baby. The twins will have a little brother or sister." Owen gathered her into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for coming here with nothing but your willing hands and your brave heart, for loving my children as your own, for giving me a second chance at happiness." "You gave me everything I ever wanted," Emma replied. "A home, a family, a partner who values me for all that I am." As the sun sank below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land that was theirs to cultivate and care for, they held each other close, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them together, with love, with courage, and with willing hands. True to Doc Finnegan's prediction, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy in early November, whom they named William Lawrence Quaid. The twins, now 16 months old and toddling everywhere, were fascinated by their new brother, peering into his cradle with solemn eyes and occasionally reaching out to touch his tiny hands. As the first snow of winter began to fall outside, Owen stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching as Emma nursed their son. Matt and Maggie played quietly on the rug beside the bed, content to be near their mother and baby brother. "Look at them," Owen said softly. Our family. Complete. Emma smiled up at him, her face glowing with maternal pride and love. For now, she said with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. But there's room in our hearts for more, don't you think? Owen crossed the room and sat beside her on the bed, putting his arm around her shoulders and gazing down at his newborn son. Plenty of room, he agreed, and plenty of time. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the land in pristine white. But inside the Quaid ranch house, all was warmth and light and love. A home built not just of timber and stone, but of shared dreams, willing hands, and hearts that had found in each other exactly what they needed.